This month on Hunt Camp Mail.
Brian, I might be just as credible as Anthony Fauci.
This guy just won the Triple Bullshit Award.
Well, fear not, Sir Richard. I have the world's greatest bullshit detector, and you just set it off, my friend. I just think the 22 Creedmoor is a little bit too gay for a pre-64 Model 70 action. Why is a buck licking the genitals of another buck important? Welcome to the June 2024 edition of Hunt Camp Mail. I hope you enjoyed my uploads this month, and I think I put out some really great content for June. The Safari Express video in particular was very time consuming to produce, and I think it really cut into my fishing time this month. But most of the mail I received this month actually pertained to that Model 70 Safari Express video. And to the folks out there asking to buy that stock that I bedded in that video, it's gone. I'm sorry. My friend showed up the next day with 2 cases of 805 and some 416 Remington brass, and he left with that stock. Yes, I am susceptible to bribes in the form of 805s. I'm also glad that I did that managing recoil video. In the future, when people ask about recoil control, I now have a resource that I can easily link them to. So before I ramble on too long, let's get to this month's mail. And our first letter for June 2024 is from Keith in Washington. Keith wrote, "The Second Amendment and our hunting heritage is under attack in the state of Washington. I've seen hunting celebrities like Craig Boddington, Ron Spomer, and Ted Nugent defend the Second Amendment publicly, but the younger generation of hunting celebrities do not do this. The new generation is so consumed by issues like corner crossings and climate change that they ignore more important matters like gun control, bans on predator hunting, and ammunition regulations. What can we do to get these newer celebrity hunters on board to fight against gun control? They have a big enough audience to bring both hunting and gun rights into the public eye." That's a great question to open up Hunt Camp Mail with. But I'm going to correct you, or at least give you my opinion on this. I don't think it's just the younger generation. Remember, FUDs like Jim Zumbo were anti-gun hunters. And, there's been a lot of anti-gun hunters out there. I mean, look at Bill Ruger. But I really don't think it's an age thing. I think it's more a function of being on the payroll of a lot of these media companies or manufacturers. All the major media companies and platforms just happen to be left-leaning politically. So a celebrity hunter needs to kind of tiptoe around issues like gun control in order to stay employed in this modern environment or to make money in this environment. Look at my small channel, Desert Dog Outdoors. Every time I defend the Second Amendment or maybe dabble into a political discussion, my leftist viewers get triggered and start whining, "Keep the topics to hunting only." Simply saying the word UTARD triggers emotionally weak hunters into fits of outrage, and this is our sad modern reality, I'm afraid. And to your question, I'm kind of drifted off topic here already, but to your question or point here, to tell you the truth, I'd rather that these celebrity hunters didn't become the face of Second Amendment advocacy. Although hunters use guns and gun control is really bad for us, the Second Amendment just isn't about hunting at all. And framing the Second Amendment as a right to hunt is just a horrible argument that's going to lose in every debate. And our next letter for June is from John. And John must not watch a lot of Hunt Camp Mail because he didn't state where he was from. But John wrote, the very first hunting rifle I bought myself was a Winchester Model 70 push feed in 30-06. I had it since I was 14 years old. Over the years, I've upgraded it so many times that there's nothing much original left except the action and the base metal. Now it has a Schillen barrel, chambered in 30-06 Ackley improved, and that is stamped on the side of the new barrel. Of course, it still happily fires normal 30-06 and fire forms every one with exceptional accuracy. I'd like to take this rifle to a Africa hunt, but will I have trouble taking that rifle with me when the head stamp on the brass says 30-06 while the barrel is marked 30-06 Ackley improved? And this is a question I get all the time, and to tell you the truth, I don't even think people listen to my advice on it. But this actually can be a problem, John. And I've heard of ammunition being rejected in the airports at both Joburg and in Harare when the head stamps, barrel, and paperwork don't all jive together. Years ago, a guy landed in Harare and had to give up his 280 Ackley improved ammo because the cases said 280 Remington on them. You know, here on a more personal note, a member of my local gun club that I've known for decades had to leave his ammo with SAPs in South Africa in the airport because his 338-06 barrel didn't match the 30-06 head stamped brass that he brought. You know, and he ended up paying to hunt with a loaner rifle on that whole trip. You know, the rifle he brought was totally unusable. Another guy that I read on a forum years ago thought it would be cool to have his barrel stamped with 275 Rigby. And he was shocked when his reloads in 7x57 brass were rejected in customs. So don't make an international hunting trip more complicated than it needs to be. It's just not worth the gamble. And on a trip like that, just don't complicate anything. Keep it simple. And our next letter is from Chris from Montana. Chris wrote, thank you for the tip on the Safari Express rifle. I don't know why I couldn't find one for sale, and I feel stupid for arguing with you and claiming there was none available. Please forgive me, and the next time you do a video on idiots, you can use me as an example. I deleted my post because I looked like an asshole. I sincerely apologize. My new Safari Express shipped this morning, and I can't wait to use it. I also saw the tip you posted for the Nosler 375 H&H brass. I ordered brass, bullets, powders, and primers all at once. I'm set for my buffalo hunt in 2025. Thank you for your help, Desert Dog. You earned a lifelong fan. Well, I accept your apology, which, wasn't necessary. Either you take my advice or you don't. Everyone kept telling me that, they had Safari Express rifles on order for years, and they didn't want to take my advice. I posted links to several brand new Safari Express rifles for, under $2,000. And there was two brand new Safari Express rifles chambered in 375 H&H that were going for $1,700 from major retailers. And I'm sure you ended up buying one of those. But within one day of me posting those links in the comment section of that video, all the rifles that I posted were sold. So now you really have to wait for Winchester to make more guns, or get hosed on Gunbroker and spend over $2,000 on one. If you didn't get one of those rifles I posted, consider this a lesson in doing research rather than making assumptions. You are correct, though. There was a huge dump of reloading supplies to all the major retailers, well, most of them. Midway got a huge stock of primers, brass, and powders, but that stuff only lasted about a week. So I hope you guys got in on the action while everything was available. I mean, Midway was even sending me notifications, that primers were popping up in stock, and I was going online and placing my orders. As a matter of fact, I just got a couple of boxes from Midway USA. Let's see what's in them. So I got a couple boxes in from Midway USA, and looks like I scored a little bit of a little haul here on reloading supplies. Some stuff I needed. So get on the notification list at all the major retailers, and when they get little dumps of reloading supplies, make sure you're on that list and you grab them while they're available. And our next letter is from Wayne. Wayne wrote, "It appears to me that the best time to bed a rifle is in the gun factory during the assembly of parts. Just wondering, is there a particular reason why gun manufacturers do not include properly bedded rifles during the manufacturing process?" Well, Wayne, mass-produced rifles like the Model 70 or the Browning X-Bolt come with basic factory bedding, meaning that those rifles are bedded in a way where the barreled action can be installed in the stock into the bedding and not be messed with again. If they did a full bedding job on a factory rifle, a mass-produced rifle like that, they need to do it before the trigger and magazine were installed. They'd probably have to inlet the stock and completely tape it off and apply clay into all of the openings and holes and crevices. And after applying the bedding compound, they'd have to clean up the overrun of bedding compound before it dries, let it sit for a day, and then they'd have to remove the barreled action, clean and trim the compound in the stock with something like a Dremel tool, completely clean the action, install the trigger mechanism back in it, then fit the whole thing back together and torque the action in. If they did this whole process, a rifle would take 3 times the amount of effort and time to manufacture. And they'd have to charge about maybe $300-400 more for a rifle, which would probably ultimately kill sales. I mean, and that's undoubtedly why they don't do it. I mean, if they were to properly bed a factory stock, I mean, it'd be almost the same price as going out and getting a custom rifle with a match grade barrel. And our next letter is from Brian from Garland, Texas. Brian wrote, "I've been collecting and studying Model 70s for over 50 years. I thought your video about the Safari Express and the history of the Model 70 Africa rifles was lacking in facts. There are many inaccuracies in that video, but I will point out the 3 obvious ones. Number 1, the Model 70 Africa name was discontinued in 1977, and it was renamed the Super Express in 1978. You have this changed between 1982 and 1983, which is totally incorrect. Number 2, Winchester didn't start making controlled round feed rifles again until 1994. You made a mistake and claimed that 1992 was the year. And number 3, the classic Safari Express never came with dual recoil lugs. We didn't see dual recoil lugs until 2010 when the new Safari Express was released by FN. I believe you should remake that video with the correct information. I have been a paid consultant for many books and articles concerning the Model 70, and I'd be willing to offer my services to you for a collaboration on a new video." With a paid consultant like you, Brian, I might be just as credible as Anthony Fauci. Congratulations, Brian. In almost 50 monthly episodes of Hunt Camp Mail, you're only the 2nd person to ever receive the Triple Bullshit Award. Bullshit! 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 Bullshit!
everybody! This guy just won the Triple Bullshit Award! Congratulations!
To your first point, this is the 1981 Winchester catalog right here. So this is 1981. And you can clearly see that it lists the Model 70 African. So in 1981, it was still called the Model 70 African. But this is the very iconic 1982 Winchester catalog with the Duke on it. Pretty awesome, huh? And you could see in here that it lists the Model 70 XTR Super Express. And it even says right here, the new Model 70 XTR Super Express Magnum rifles, their performance and dependability stems from the proven Model 70 African. So obviously, 1982 was the year that they dumped the Model 70 African name and renamed it the Model 70 XTR Super Express. And this is the 1992 Winchester catalog right here. And as you can clearly see, so when they came out with the Classic Series, new for 92, with, you guessed it, controlled round feed. I believe even if you bought a super grade, that also came with controlled round feed. So virtually every hunter with any knowledge of the Model 70 knows that controlled round feed came back in 1992 with the Classic Series rifles. And I just don't know how you can consider yourself a Model 70 expert, Brian. And to your last point, this is the 2003 Winchester catalog. And as you can see right here, for the Model 70 Classic Safari Express, they're clearly advertising dual recoil lugs. Let me pull this in closer right here so you could see it. It says dual recoil lugs. And I've personally seen dual recoil lugs on these Classic Safari Express rifles. My point is that the Classic Safari Express had dual recoil lugs by at least 2003. And I believe that that's when they were added, because the 2002 Winchester catalog doesn't list dual recoil lugs as a feature. I obviously don't know everything, Brian, and I'll admit it, I have a lot more to learn. But at least I do the best research I can possibly do before I make a video. You know, I strive to give you guys accurate information, even if it means collecting and reading a bunch of old gun catalogs. Brian, you know, I hate to be mean to people who write me or my viewers, but I think I would be doing my subscribers a disservice by letting you off the hook on this one. So many people flock to the internet for information, and unfortunately, most of it is from people like you. You know, I did a video on fake experts, and I'm going to call a spade a spade. I doubt that you were ever a paid consultant for any books or articles on the Model 70. You know, I have the world's greatest bullshit detector, and you just set it off, my friend. And to my viewers, when you search for stuff on internet forums or look through comments for YouTube videos, guys like Brian are the types that you're taking advice from. So be very careful. And our next letter is from Hagen in Uruguay. Hagen wrote, "How do you like the traditional express sights on big bore rifles? I've tried them repeatedly at trade shows, but can never warm up to the exceedingly shallow V-notch. Are they still practical in the 21st century?" Well, Hagen, you know, I think they actually are relevant. Dangerous game hunters use them for the speed, the quick tracking, and the good view you get over the top of the bore. You know, if you're looking for precision, you probably won't like express sights. Express sights aren't made for accuracy or long shots. When you think express sights, think snapshots at 30 yards on a running buffalo. And you also need to realize that not all express sights are the same. You know, like you, I'm not a fan of the really shallow V-notch sights, like the ones you see on something like a Saco brown bear. But the ones that have that secondary deep groove in the middle, like the Winchester Safari Express sight or the New England custom gun sights, those express sights are great in my opinion because they have that secondary notch in the middle, and you could put the bead right inside that deep groove, and I think that helps out a lot. But if I had to use iron sights only, I think I'd use a peep or a ghost ring sight, which is way more accurate, and I think it's way more easier on these old eyes. You know, I couldn't use a Springfield 1903 sights right now if probably my life depended on it. So thank goodness for scopes with diopter adjustments, or I probably wouldn't be shooting too well. And our next letter is from Richard in the UK. Richard wrote, I'd be very interested in hearing your views on the technical aspects of shooting up and down slopes. There seems to be very little information out there, and what there is seems muddled and contradictory. Well, fear not, Sir Richard. I'm going to clear things up for you. And you're right. I think people complicate a simple thing with this. In simple terms, when shooting uphill or downhill, the bullet always impacts higher than it would at a similar distance shooting on flat ground. Gravity affects the bullet path more when you're shooting parallel to the ground. As the angle of the shot, drastically increases or decreases, the effects of gravity on the bullet actually decrease. So the bullet drops less. And this is actually a really big deal for longer shots. But with modern rangefinders with angle compensation features in them, it makes it really easy to compensate for. For shots over 300 yards, a rangefinder with angle compensation is vital in my opinion. For instance, if I was hunting, let's say, a 308 and shooting a deer at a 30-degree angle at 300 yards, the bullet would have the ballistics of about a 260-yard shot. So if I dialed my scope in that same instance for a 300-yard shot, I'd be shooting 3 or 4 inches high. If I took that same shot, but the angle was 60 degrees instead of 30 degrees, I'd be shooting 6 inches or more high. So when you get beyond 300 yards, angle compensation is vital in my opinion. Our next letter is from Simon from Lexington, Kentucky. Simon wrote, I love the Safari Express video. I own 2 FN Safari Express rifles, one made in South Carolina and one made in Portugal. The quality on both is amazing, but I think the wood and bedding on the Portugal rifle is actually better than the South Carolina rifle. One rifle is a 375 H&H and the other is a 416 Rem Mag. I'm traveling to Africa and I plan to hunt a buffalo in August. I know you are a fan of both the 375 and the 416. What would you take? To your first statement in your letter, the bedding is definitely better on the Portugal rifles in my opinion. Winchester stopped using that weird tan-colored goop to bed their rifles, and they switched to what looks to be something like DevCom. So I agree with your observations on that. And to your question, people need to stop saying, I'm going to Africa when they want advice. Africa is a huge continent comprised of over 50 countries, and each country has vastly different terrain, animals, laws, and culture, and methods of hunting buffalo will be wildly different between the different areas of Africa. If you're hunting buffalo in a place like coastal Mozambique, where you hunt huge herds in open areas, I'd honestly take the 375 H&H with a medium power optic and expect longer shots. And most of those shots on herd buffalo like that will also be broadside shots. And, your PH is going to select a bull out of the herd for you. So magnification is important in that situation. And you also want something that shoots flat and has maybe less recoil. And I think the 375 is perfect for that task. Now, if you're hunting dagoboys in the really thick gests, maybe a place like the Zambezi Valley, most shots will be slightly quartering or full frontal shots through really thick brush at really close distances. And in that scenario, the 416s and 458s really shine, in my opinion.
You come on a buffalo safari, the idea, everybody always, you want to shoot the buffalo on the shoulder or just behind the shoulder. They don't always stand broadside.
Sure.
And that is a key factor, if you want to call it a factor, that a hunter needs to look at. So that animal a lot of them would be quartering towards you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to take a quartering away shot. That does happen, but broadside quartering towards you from whichever angle. And then the frontal, the 416 does better.
Okay.
The frontal, personally, with the 375, I won't let a client take a frontal with a 375.
Okay.
Unless it's extremely close, but still, it's just not worth it. 416, you can do it.
And our next letter is from Frank in Texas. Frank wrote, after watching your last buffalo hunt, the Africa Q&A video, and the video you just posted, I see that you like the 416 Remington Magnum. I've heard that the 416 Rem gets highly overpressured in hot weather and can be dangerous. Because of this, my gunsmith wants to convert one of my old Remington 700 rifles to 458 Win Mag for my first buffalo hunt in 2026. The cost of building a dangerous game rifle this way is very cheap, and I'm surprised more people don't do this instead of spending a fortune on a Model 70 or Park West rifle. I'm thinking of hunting thick brush for buffalo and possibly tuskless elephant. Do you think this is a good idea? Well, my first piece of advice to you, Frank in Texas, is to find another gunsmith to get advice from. That guy obviously knows very little about Africa hunting rifles or dangerous game cartridges. Secondly, the 416 Remington Magnum does not suffer from overpressure issues. The issue with the 416 Remington Magnum was actually the Remington 700 rifles themselves, both the design and the build quality. I mean, if you want to look at pressure, your iconic 270 Winchester has more pressure than the 416 Remington Magnum. So that's just a myth. George Hoffman, who was a writer, an African PH, and the inventor of, legendary cartridges like the 416 Hoffman, was sent a brand new Remington 700 from the factory to test the new 416 Remington Magnum. And this is what he had to say. According to George Hoffman, right out of the box, the Remington 700 that was sent to him had feed issues, and rounds were actually popping up out of the magazine when you would chamber a new one. So this rifle would have been totally unusable for a dangerous game hunt. Then Hoffman goes on to state that the trigger was probably close to 16 pounds. Again, borderline unusable. Hoffman did love the cartridge, but the Model 700 rifle that they sent him was a piece of crap. And if that's what a legend like George Hoffman was sent by Remington, you have to imagine that many of the original Remington 700s chambered in 416 Rem Mag probably had poor quality too. And lastly, that tiny thumbnail extractor on the Remington 700 was ultimately its undoing. It's a design that proved to be unreliable with dangerous game cartridges, especially when you get over 375 H&H Magnum levels. Many African PHs have horror stories of 700 extractors just breaking in the heat of the moment. And let's listen to what one of the most respected experts on dangerous game thinks about the Remington 700. Here's what Dr. Kevin Robertson had to say.
So we got into this herd of elephants in the jets, and there was that Tuttless cow there, an old cow in Tuttless. And this whole hunting incident took place in October, which and October in the Zambezi Valley is known as suicide month. So Mrs. Habitat got into a position to this old Tuttless elephant cow, and I told her she could take a side brain shot, which she did, and she shot too high, and there was this elephant cow staggering around like I was drunk, and I shouted to her to reload and to shoot it again. And I glanced down at her, and I saw that I shouted at her, shoot it again! And she finally got the bolt lifted, and as she pulled it back and she tried to ram another cartridge in, and of course she had a massive jam. And what had actually happened, she'd actually pulled the extractor right off that little fingernail extractor. She'd ripped it right off. So
oh my!
All of a sudden, her new Remington M700 rifle was suddenly a very expensive club. And we were in amongst this. All these elephants were shouting and screaming, and there she was standing with a rifle with the cartridge case jammed into the chamber, and that was it. So luckily the others learned to shot the elephant cow, and we managed to get out of there until normally just retreat until eventually everything died down. But the rifle was absolutely useless. We had to take a cleaning rod and then go and beat the cartridge case out. It was quite interesting because after that, there was a real wake-up call that after that, everybody that had a push-feed fingernail extractor rifle, we made them carry a cleaning rod with them when they went on. Very early on in my professional hunting career, from that moment onwards, I viewed every rifle that had a push-feed rifle with a little fingernail extractor with the greatest of suspicion. It was a real learning curve for me, and I was very much against those rifles ever since then, and I remain so to this day.
And here's what an absolute legend of Africa hunting, Don Heath, had to say about the Remington 700. And our next letter is from Gary from South Louisiana. Gary wrote, I mostly use a Model 70 and 30-06. From habit, I chamber around by dropping one on top of the magazine. The extractor doesn't want to jump over the rim. I've never tried to force it and have used a cleaning rod to tap the round back out. Will the extractor jump over the rim with a little force to close the bolt without doing damage? Gary, the original Mauser, the old, 98, was not made to single feed cartridges into the chamber. People who tried that often ended up with chipped extractors or damaged brass. But the Springfield was actually designed to single feed rounds. The Model 70 evolved from the Springfield, basically, not the Mauser 98. So the Model 70 was designed with ample space for the extractor to snap over the rim of the case. It was never recommended to repeatedly single feed a Model 70 due to wear on the extractor, but it was considered acceptable to do when you needed to. The classic rifles made from 1992 to 1999 did have MIM extractors, and those could theoretically be damaged from single feeding. But with the controlled round feed Model 70s made after 1999, they went back to spring steel or machined stainless extractors, and Single feeding is perfectly fine with the newer Model 70s. Just be mindful that you'll encounter more resistance when closing the bolt when single feeding a Model 70, and that resistance is actually normal. And our next letter is from Glenn in Idaho. Glenn wrote, I'm a former Merced County, California game warden and now an Idaho resident. I've written to you before, and I really appreciate your discretion and decency toward game wardens. A recent training opportunity memo was sent out within the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and some folks there shared it with me and suggested the public may be interested in the direction that the department has taken. The concern is the forced inclusion of politics and political messaging into the science of wildlife management. At a time when game species are struggling for a variety of real-world causes, the priority seems to be pandering to political causes. Included is a screenshot of the memo, and here's a screenshot of that internal memo from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife that Glenn sent me. We're doomed. I mean, we're doomed. So we just had our first 2 cases of chronic wasting disease in California history. Predator numbers in the state are exploding. Salmon numbers are plummeting. Poachers are just running wild everywhere right now. And people are cheating their way through online hunter safety courses because there's no accountability. With all of this going on right now, the great biologist at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife think studying queer behavior in animals is important work. Why is a buck licking the genitals of another buck important? You know, what secrets of wildlife management does that science unlock? California is just a dumpster fire, from the governor all the way down to hourly employees of the state. You know, considering where we are, where we live, you know, our Department of Fish and Wildlife has historically been pretty good, actually, about staying away from liberal politics when it comes to hunting and fishing. But it seems like the same people have left the state. And just like that, a buck can identify as a doe and become illegal to hunt. And our next letter is from James in Damascus, Virginia. James wrote, I just watched your Safari Express video. Excellent. I have a South Carolina made 375. I also had a 9.3 by 62 built on a 1993 Model 70 donor rifle. My question is, should I upgrade the extractor from the 93 Model 70? You stated in the video that Williams had one. What is my contact info for that? And how big of a deal is that to do? Well, James, yeah, I probably would swap out the extractor on the 1993 Model 70. I believe Williams maybe recently went out of business, probably because FN started making their own extractors instead of buying them from Williams. But you can buy replacement extractors from various places. Numerich being one of them. I've bought a lot of parts from Numerich before. Just remember, there's a standard extractor and a Magnum extractor, and you need to order the correct one for your application. But changing out extractors on a controlled round feed Model 70 is actually very easy to do. And our next letter is from Jason. Once again, Jason must not watch a lot of Hunt Camp Mail because I don't know where he's from. Jason wrote, before I purchased the Bald Eagle Rest, is the model you have the BE1153? Also, is Grizzly the only place to purchase these? Do you prefer the radius front bag or do you suggest the flat one? Well, I looked it up, and that is the model that you want, Jason. And yeah, order them directly from Grizzly. So people who make them, send your money their way. On the front bags, buy a radius front bag and a flat front bag. Buy one of each. If you're chasing precision off the bench, your front bag needs to match the profile of the rifle forend. Most of my hunting rifles need that curved radius bag, and most of my precision rifles need a flat bag. So get both and swap them out accordingly. And our next letter is from Chris. And once again, Chris didn't say where he was from. Chris wrote, I'm getting back into reloading as a joint project with my grandson. I look at it as a way for me to enjoy tuning up a great hunting rifle while enjoying the hunt vicariously through my grandson. That's a great idea. I don't have a chronograph. I want to get the best or none at all. And right now, the best is out of my budget after investing in a Howa Action, a stock, a scope, plus all the dies, tools, and components for 7mm 08. Back in the day, people were successful in reloading without chronographs. Given that the cost of a top-end chrono may be a significant barrier to some, is it appropriate to go back to the old school ways for a while? If so, can you remind us of the basics of reloading sans chronograph? I plan to get one of the new Doppler chronos next year, but I don't like the idea of waiting another year to get this going with my grandson. That's a great letter. And I think it's fantastic that you're getting back into reloading with your grandson. I also think that you're an absolute genius for not buying a chronograph until you can afford a really good one. I wish more reloaders did that. I watch YouTube personalities use those cheap optical chronos all the time, like the Caldwell ones or the Shooting Crony. And I just cringe because I've tested those and I know that their results are probably way off, or at least not consistent. Those cheap Shooting Cronies are nowhere near accurate enough for proper load development purposes, in my opinion. You truly are better off not using a chronograph at all than using a crappy one. And when you can afford one, I highly recommend the newer Garmin chronograph. I mean, these things have all the positive attributes of a lab radar and none of the downsides that the lab radar has, which the lab radar does have a few downsides. And look how small it is. I mean, it's tiny. So easy to throw in your range bag and use anywhere. I mean, I just love this chrono. And this is what I recommend. If you're going to save for a really good one, this is the one you should save for. But back to your question, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing old school OCW and ladder tests on paper. In fact, you should be teaching this to your grandson so he can visually see what, a powder node or, accuracy on paper looks like. And, I definitely think you're doing things right, especially with, spending time with your grandson and teaching him to reload. And just as a reminder, I have a new reloading process video that I'll try to put out next month. I've been, kind of thinking about it and putting it together little by little over the last few months. There's been a lot of new theory when it comes to reloading processes, and I'm going to delve a little bit into that. So stay tuned for that video, Chris. And our next letter is from Mike in Utah. Mike wrote, I love the UTARD jokes. They're sad but painfully true. But your last hunt camp mail, where you responded to Samuel's letter about our Utah game wardens, is actually very true. I don't think it's the game wardens' fault, though, because their bosses are trying to use them to collect revenue from traffic tickets rather than investigating wildlife crimes. The problem is corruption at the top. Here's a recent news report about how bad it is to be a game warden in the state of Utah right now. And Mike sent me a disturbing video about how things with the Utah Department of Natural Resources are being conducted right now. And here's some clips from that video.
Wildlife officers in Utah say they're spending more time doing busy work, less time doing police work because of a new policy that went into effect last year.
It's no longer about catching bad people doing bad things, but doing things in an effort to justify the numbers to meet their quota.
Instead of focusing more time on wildlife crime, they're pulling people over on the freeway and documenting trash on the side of the road. But their main job is to protect Utah's natural resources. Each officer has 2,000 square miles to cover. They investigate poachers and have more specialized training than your average patrol officer in time.
Why did you decide to become a game warden? I imagine it's not so you can sit on I-15 and write speeding tickets.
No, it's not. We also protect the critters out there that nobody can speak for.
But the wildlife officers say there's less of that than before, ever since the chief implemented a new performance goal last summer, requiring them to document one violation of the law every 23 hours.
It's just to provide officers with some sort of measurable goal so we can gauge some level of success or performance.
Officers say they view it as a quota, which lawmakers banned in 2018, specifically targeting tickets and arrests. The goal was to stop police from treating drivers like piggy banks.
Can you understand why some officers say they think it resembles a quota?
It's not.
So you're saying because you've replaced the word citations with violations, it's not a quota?
They're different.
The result this year, records show traffic violations documented by wildlife officers are on pace to more than double since 2021. The Natural Resources Executive Director had no explanation.
I don't know what would cause that, right? I think
You don't think this would cause that?
If you really need a number, it's a lot easier to go out and work the highway than it is to go up on the mountain.
He says wildlife officers are now doubling up on UHP's job.
As the head of DNR, do you want officers creating police reports for things as simple as trash on the ground?
If that's part of their job, yes, absolutely.
Well, is it? I mean, you're the one who sets whether it's part of their job.
Well, I mean, it's part of their task.
Report is reviewed by a supervisor to ensure quality control. When we asked to see those reports, which are public records, the department tried to charge us $5,000.
Are traffic violations on the freeway going up since this was put into effect?
I don't know.
60 seconds later in the interview, the executive director changed his answer.
The numbers don't play that out. We're not issuing more violations on our highways. We're not.
Actually, the numbers do play that out. After this interview, the department sent us reports showing wildlife officers are on pace to document more violations on freeways this year.
To have these performance goals, we're law enforcement officers.
That's not true either. They're not mandated to have these performance goals. In fact, since Utah banned quotas, records show more than 110 police departments decided not to grade officers based on the amount of crime they find. Says it would be a lot easier for him to sit down with officers and explain what he's trying to accomplish if he knew who the officers were. As of right now, the department does not plan on making any changes unless the legislature steps in and changes the law.
Not only are the guys in charge neglecting wildlife crimes because they don't generate revenue, but they're also engaged in blatant lies and an effort to conceal the truth, it seems. You know, even worse, they're trying to bypass Utah state laws that make ticket quotas illegal. And you're right, Mike, some bad shit is going down in Utah right now, and your wildlife is probably going to suffer because of it. I know for a fact that a game warden will work for days or even weeks to catch a poacher, and telling them that they need to write a violation for something every day detracts from that important work. And hunters, anglers, and our wildlife depend on game wardens, and taking them off their job to do stupid shit is a huge mistake in my opinion. So it seems like the real UTARDS in the state of Utah are the people running the Department of Natural Resources there. And our next letter is from Seth in Indiana. Seth wrote, my question is, what are your thoughts on different state hunting license costs for residents and non-residents, especially in terms of hunter access? My home state recently increased the prices for non-residents drastically across the board. I've researched opportunities to hunt out of state, and quite frankly, I would never pay for some of those tag prices for elk, mule deer, or even turkey. In some of these states, it seems like plain old price gouging. It's amazing that every American child is born a part owner of millions of acres of land, but now has slowly become a subject to a pay and play game for hunting. And the price point of licenses alone will restrict access for many. I get that everyone and their mother wants an elk tag in Colorado and that there's not enough tags for everyone. But do you really need to charge what they do? Especially with conservation so heavily funded with tax dollars. With the Great American Outdoors Act and the Pittman tax, do these states really need to charge $800 or more for an elk tag in the name of conservation? That's an excellent letter. And to tell you the truth, there's some people out there that actually like that tags are harder to get and more expensive. But that's not me. I'm not one of those people. You know, I could see the logic in limiting tags based upon the health and size of the local game population. You know, any hunter understands the need to limit tags in certain areas and for certain species, you know, and I don't even think that is up for debate here. But as you pointed out, the cost is actually an issue now. It's almost like some states are telling people, you know, living paycheck to paycheck in this economy, that there's no need for them to apply to hunt public land because they're too poor. And I think that's bullshit. You know, this boils down to the misappropriation of wildlife funds by agencies. You know, in my state, I guess our Department of Fish and Wildlife is spending money studying the queerness of animals. You know, I doubt that that research is free and is probably funded by our hunting license revenue. So basically, they bring in tons of this revenue and they waste it. You know, bureaucrats are running our wildlife agencies right now. I mean, look at that previous question I answered about the stuff going on in Utah. And these agencies are always looking for ways to bring in more money to pay for bullshit that doesn't matter. And our last letter for June is from Steve in Southwest Texas. Steve wrote, Mr. Dog, I have a K98 in 8mm and an early 1950s Winchester Model 70 and 30-06. I want to build a 22 Creedmoor. Given the SAMI pressure of 62,000 for the 22 Creedmoor, and given your thoughts on the Mauser's metallurgy, are either of these actions suitable for a 22 Creedmoor build? Should I find a stronger, more modern action to start with? Well, Steve, you know, I never said that there was a problem with Model 70 metallurgy. I don't know where that came from. The receivers on Model 70s dating way back, you know, even your 1950s Model 70 receiver, are made from strong chromoly with a great heat treat process on them. Bolt thrust is what causes lug setback on those old Mauser 98s, though. You know, in addition to cartridge pressure, bolt thrust is also proportional to case head size. And since the 8mm Mauser and the 22 Creedmoor will have similar case head area, the increased pressure of the 22 Creedmoor will probably increase bolt thrust, and it will be harder on those old case hardened K98K lug recesses. If it was me, I'd just buy a modern rifle if I was really crazy about the 22 Creedmoor. You know, save those old Mauser actions for the classic cartridges. You know, the Model 70 receiver that you have will easily handle the 22 Creedmoor. I mean, a huge percentage of those rifles were chambered in 270 Winchester, which exceeds the pressure and bolt thrust numbers that the 22 Creedmoor has. I just don't think you should use that Model 70 receiver to build a 22 Creedmoor. I just think the 22 Creedmoor is a little bit too gay for a pre-64 Model 70 action. Well, that's it for this month. Here's some memes for the month of June. I think this is maybe like my 47th episode of Hunt Camp Mail that I've done. And I've noticed a trend throughout the years with questions I get constantly. And they usually involve people that dearly want to overcomplicate simple things. So before I go, I want to talk about the tendency of my viewers to grossly overcomplicate simple things. My last video about the turbo cooler was an absolute case study in a condition called complexity bias. I made a video about a simple $20 device that you hook up to your rifle for a minute or two between shots to bring the barrel back down close to ambient temperature. That seems very simple, cheap, and effective, right? Well, that comment section and my email just filled up with people wanting blowers mounted in ice chests with blocks of ice, CO2 systems, leaf blowers with garden hoses attached, and guys parking their trucks next to the bench so they can run 12-volt powered blowers on their rifle. Trust me, complexity bias is a bad thing. Simple always wins. Well, I have some diverse content set up for July that I think you're really going to enjoy, including a video about combating point of impact shifts while you're shooting. You can reach me with any questions or comments at desertdogoutdoors@gmail.com. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.